Hello, everyone. Welcome to Supply Chain Talks. Welcome to our fourth webinar, which is Importance of Demand Planning in Supply Chain. It's a topic very close to me. It's something that I'm doing this webinar also as not just as a host or as a moderator for this topic, but also as a student. I would also be very keen on learning from these three greats that I have who are the subject matter experts. So without any further ado, let me introduce my expert panelists. From last month or early this month, you already know Chidan. Chidan has joined us again for this session. I've also joined by Mr. Bashir for this session and by Imran Jamil as well. So first, I would request Chidan, if you can please introduce yourself to our audience.
I am Çiğdem Şenbay. I am an industrial engineering and working in a textile company named Coats PLC for last 13 years. In this company, actually, I started as planning analyst and then afterwards had many roles about the planning, including the material planning, demand planning, and customer service, warehouses, etc. And latest, I had the director position of the supply chain for Turkey. Now, recently, I'm also working on the global projects for supply chain. Just as an addition, I can say that I am interested in also the technical side of the supply chain. Recently, I have these EPIC certifications on supply chain and planning in order to improve myself technically. So this is shortly me. Based in Bursa, Turkey.
Okay. Thank you. And Chidan, again, a big congratulations on getting your EPIC certification from me.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Mr. Bashir, you were my senior back in Unilever, so I would like if you may please introduce yourself.
So, no seniors, no juniors, and I think this is the technologically basically advanced situation because the juniors are more seniors nowadays because they are more advanced as compared to seniors. So let me introduce myself because I worked in a marketing research organization, started my career with the marketing research organization from Pakistan. Then I joined Unilever in a finance, management accountancy, and then moved to supply chain. I love the best part of supply chain because when you enter, and I decided this is my career over here. So started from supply planning, distribution planning, warehousing, logistics. So I took in charge so many projects, and because it's a huge organization, so I worked in a different businesses of the Unilever because that is foods, ice cream, home and personal care, hot tea. So I worked in all the projects. So then over a period of time, supply planning I've been moved to demand planning, and then I've been given a task as to implement SNOP, so from a green field. So I have basically, you can say that, and there's a feather on my cap that I implemented SNOP process in Unilever in 2007, 2006 old days. And then I got a chance to implement the SAP APO as a business lead with the close coordination with the IT experts, marketing, sales, supply chain. So set up an entire team over there, train them, groom them, and then move to different other projects like procurements. I moved into the procurement also. I worked a few years in procurement also, and then I got opportunities, totally different industry. So oil and gas at that point in time. Now recent days is being called energy industry. So be British Petroleum. So I got opportunity to set up some of the process over here in the Middle East. So when I thought Middle East going to be small setup, but when I entered over here, so the definition of the geographies are totally different. So Middle East started from Egypt, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Levant, GCC. So all around 18, 19 countries I'm looking after. So this is my plus 20 years of experience in different organizations, different industries. So this is I am over here, father of 3 kids, teenagers, and they think that they are much better than me. So I have different challenges right now. They're all teenagers, go ready for universities. One of them is going ready for university. So they talk about AI, all the advanced things, and which is I'm trying to learn from there to improve my skills. Still, I'm keen to interest all those things. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Bashir. Thank you. So I can feel you on the new challenges with kids. Believe me, suddenly you
Yes.
start to feel obsolete. So, Imran, if you please also introduce yourself for our audience.
Hi everyone, my name is Imran. Just like Chidam, I'm a mechanical engineer by education, but I've worked in operations and supply chain for almost 13 years. Have been in almost every single part of supply chain and manufacturing, engineering, demand planning, supply planning, logistics. I started again similar to I think Numan and Bashir. I had experience with Unilever. That's what my first job was. I spent a good 7 years with Unilever, then moved to Reckitt Benckiser's, which is the manufacturer of Dettol in Middle East. Set up one of their factories from planning logistics side. Then got an opportunity with Fonterra, where I'm currently working. As I've moved with Fonterra to multiple countries in Saudi Arabia, I've worked in Malaysia. Right now I'm based out of Dubai. I look after supply chain for the Middle East. And as Bashir was mentioning, it's Middle East is a different definition. It's including Levant, even Turkey. So overall, roughly around 20 odd countries that I look after from supply chain perspective, and passionate about supply chain. I've done Apex certifications because again, as everyone in supply chain is, things are changing. We want to keep us updated. So again, father of two beautiful girls, a 10-year-old and a 4-year-old, and not yet started to feel obsolete as of yet, but probably getting there. Thank you. That was me.
Thank you. I think, Imran, with being daughter of girls, you would soon be learning, or probably you might have already learned about K-pop. That is something that, unfortunately, I'm embracing right now, the K-pop culture through my girls. So you will soon come to that.
Hopefully not. Fingers crossed.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for the introduction. And I'm happy to have this vast, experience, especially from a cross industry, textile, FMCG, food, and oil and gas and slash energy. So I hope today our session brings in the experience from these three different dynamic industries and let people understand what is demand planning and appreciate the role of demand planning, not just within supply chain, but also how important it is for the organization. So before we deep dive into the main topics, I would like to start off with the very basics. And basically, that is what exactly is demand planning and what is the role that it plays in supply chain and for the organizations. So I would put this question first to Chidan, if you can, please.
Okay. As the basic of the demand planning, I can say that demand planning is a process of building estimates by using statistical techniques and judgments about the products that we are selling, or we are selling as a final product, semi-finished goods, raw materials, or service parts. And it is one of the keys of the SNOP planning. Actually, it is a starting point, because according to the demand planning results, actually you define your resources, raw materials that will be used, the labors, etc. Everything is being calculated based on the demand planning outputs, actually. So it is really key for sales and operations planning. Also, operations and manufacturing in order to increase the efficiency utilization, and also to decrease the waste in terms of the waste of stocks, etc. And also it is very important for your revenue, because if you can produce the right product on right time, then your profit and sales will increase and your revenue will increase. Actually, as it is a really key driver in the all organization and the all supply chain.
Okay.
Simply,
Thank
yeah.
you. Thank you. That is a very holistic, definition of demand that you have provided.
Yes,
I
yes.
couldn't have said it much any better than that. But Bashir Saab, if you can also please give us your 2 cents on it as well.
I will echo because it's a very detailed definition for that, but I will build on to that because it's a process. People confuse that it's a only supply chain process. In the contrary, I say it's a business planning process to help understand demand and its volatility, and communicates it in a timely and effective way throughout the business and supply chain, so that we can better meet customer needs. So what exactly that? So that by doing that, we are understanding of unconstrained demand given a current products, because whatever industry we are products or services, we are planning for those. So what we are doing, we are understanding unconstrained demand given current product portfolios and the services. And why we are doing that? So that we can understand the magnitude of sales opportunity for medium, short term to the long term, because normally S&OP, whatever the horizon organization are using, if we are using 12 months, we are 24 months, so that we can understand the magnitude of sales opportunity that's lying in the marketplace. So that we have having the right product at the right place, at the right time, and the right price to satisfy customer demand. Because all the before point of sale decisions has to be made based on those forecasts. That's really very, very critical for any supply chain. So, and I will build on afterwards, because this is the only definitions why we need these things. So this is it for the time being.
I think the key takeaway from for me from your is that we have to appreciate that yes, this is a business process. This is not just a supply chain, as I mentioned. That how demand planning also plays a role, not just for supply chain but for the organization. And people need to understand and appreciate the R's of for the organization, the right location, the right quantity, the quality, the price, everything. So the R's are very key, and demand helps in defining those R's as well for the organization. So moving forward, taking the same discussion forward to Imran. Imran, if you can also add to what Mr. Bashir and Chidan was saying.
I think whatever Bashir and Chidam have said, they have summarizes pretty well. But just building on again what Bashir has said, that it's part of a business planning process, but it's one of the most critical part, I would say, apart from the financial build that there is. I would say, even I would go that it's heartbeat of the business process. It tells you that what is needed, when it is needed, what are the decisions required for organization, and something that's directly related to business performance, business profitability, something that directly impacts. We have seen studies, again, it differs from organization to organization, but for example, a mere 5-7% of demand focus accuracy can impact 2% of EBIT of an organization. Again, it differs from organization to organization. So as the team have said, that it is a business planning process. It should never be seen as just a supply chain process. It is a process to get the feel of the market, what is needed at what time, what location, so that overall the business can optimize its supply, the business can optimize its profitability, the business can optimize its service levels.
So true. Thank you, Imran, and agree with you. But now, again, we established the importance of the definition of demand for this webinar. Now, moving forward to my next question, and I would be now putting this to Bashir. If you can, this links to what we were also discussing last night as well on this question, that how important is transparency of information throughout the supply chain, and what role does demand planning play in it? So I would like you to start off with this.
Great, because have a different tangent, because then I have experience to work in a big multinationals like you, because so now the perspective of all the big multinationals is from traceability to transparency. So they are differentiating between traceability. Traceability is because you get to know what's happening in the value chain. Because if you recall the supply chain process, if all the participants, from supplier to customer. So it will goes to from supplier purchasing orders the suppliers for raw materials, packaging materials, to the material production planning, then it's a distribution to the sales. So this is a material flow from supplier to the customer. And there's the information flow is from customer to the your end supplier. So this is the very, very critical part of supply chain. And all the organizations nowadays, um, what they're trying to do to know what is happening upstream in a supply chain, and to communicate this knowledge both internally and externally. So who's the supplier, where that base is. So if you can say that supply chain transparency helps to ensure as a company is doing the right thing, or at least trying to do this right. a- Achieving transparency, however, is neither easy nor cheap. It's very, very difficult. For example, in this particular information age, it is very difficult to hide anything. You would prefer to remain undiscovered. This is true for our businesses as it is for individuals and consumers. So consumers and activists are nowadays, and investors increasingly want to know the products they buy and source sustainably or ethically. So sustainability and ethically, they are right now very cautious, and they are demanding more supply chain transparency. They would like to know from where you are procuring raw material for this particular product, from where you are producing, what kind of warehouses has been through. The reason for this increased interest are clear. Companies are under pressure from governments, consumers, non-governmental organizations, and other stakeholders to understand more information about their supply chain. And the reputational cost, the repute is huge of failing to meet these demands can be very, very high. The demand for transparency is not passing fade. So especially I talk about because X generation, Y generation, but the millennials have a demonstrated keen interest because they are the biggest consumers right now and the investors for the future. Millennials has demonstrated keen interest in social issues like climate change and human trafficking. They are also poised to command the consumer investor space. Right now they are coming and commanding these spaces, whether they are consumer, whether they are investors. When it comes to investing, millennials are twice as likely as members of older generation, both to invest in companies and funds that seek specific social or environmental outcomes, and to shun investments in the businesses that engage in unethical activity. So they will not going to invest in the organization where they are unethical. So I'm just giving you the background. So, and they are willing to pay extra for sustainable products and increase from 50%. So they are right now, a study showed that from 2014, initially around 50% of the millennials were willing to pay more on the basically products which have a transparency. Right now it's increased to 73%. So it's very, very important. So when the supply chain is transparent, it is visible to management, and then operations can be more proactive in avoiding anything that will impact the brand. Right now, in a COVID situation, because unprecedented situation, so companies would like to know the entire value chain because the supply chain is networked between the company and its supplier to produce and distribute a product. A bad news weighs hardest on the brand itself. A lack of transparency always holds the possibility of a reputational risk. So you're going to lose the trust on the organization. I can give you the example from my industry. So PET is the plastic, basically raw material. So if you are producing PET by using the waste, so European buyers would like to pay 15% more price over the if you're going to generate or produce PET with the oil products because they are so concerned about the climate. So this is the more important. So the manufacturing supply chains need transparency throughout the process to avoid bad process outcomes from failures in the chain. So these are the very, very important things. So in COVID-19 makes this need for supply chain transparency much more apparent. Supply chain transparency is critical for helping businesses quickly identify and mitigate the impact of crisis. Without it, business may not be aware of disruptions in their supply chain until it affects their immediate supplier, at which point it is too late to adopt while still delivering on time. So these are the very, very important points because, and this is it from my side, and I'll leave the floor for rest of the.
Thank you, Bashir. And I think the example that you gave at the end regarding the PET and using it or recycling, manufacturing PET from a recycled material rather than going through an oil-based product, that kind of information, when it flows through a transparent supply chain, it helps the supply management as well to procure the right material and bring value to the organization. So again, demand, understanding the demand. What is it? Demand is just not the quantities, but actually the product or service that a customer is looking for, as you mentioned. So, and translating that within the organization adds value to the company. So thank you. That was a very holistic input on this. So, but moving forward, Imran, your point of view on this as well, please.
So it's simply, I think the answer is extremely important. The transparency within supply chain is extremely important because of all the reasons that Bashir have just said. There's increasing focus on sustainability. There is increasing focus on all of those things that that really matters. People want to invest in future. Now new generation is focused just not in present. They want to see their future secure. So a lot of this is coming just as Bashir have said, PET example. Let me give you example on food. People want to know right now, and very soon you will see that products will have QR codes and barcodes, which would eventually link it that which product has come from which farm, in which location, etc., etc. So all of these things are coming again. This is from the business side and the product side. If I talk specifically about demand planning, I think overall for demand planning perspective, for business planning perspective, it is garbage in and garbage out. If you don't have a correct information and if you don't have the transparency throughout the system, your business will be so volatile that you cannot practically function. So basically, the transparency is directly linked to the output that you're getting in throughout the process. And the role of demand planning in this specific scenario is that demand planning, in my opinion, is one of the functions that holds the neutrality, I would say. So, for example, demand planning should not reflect just supply chain perspective or just the sales and marketing perspective. So, demand planning is basically a function that brings everything together, make sure that everything is transparent, takes input even from upstreams, for example, distributor, your customer, your consumer, and translates that transparently across the business to get the best outcome, and the outcome that is neutral in a way, so that the entire organization trusts on that information and works upon it. And once you get that kind of information, which is transparent, which is clean, I would say, then there's credibility that is built in, and then the whole volatility becomes smaller and smaller as we go along. So that's my 2 cents on this.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And yes, Imran, agree with you. Technology already that, when we see the trends which are forecasted for the, not just for the future, I think COVID actually fast-tracked a lot of technologies which were planned for coming years. For technologies, they have been really put on focus, and technology is supporting the whole transparency movement. And now the paradigm is being shifted. Yes, the more you are transparent with your customers, the more loyalty they will show back to you. So it's not about at all hiding of anything, but plain and simple show everything. The customer, the consumer are also well informed. They know what they want, so and they demand what they want. So transparency helps that, and demand planning, as you initially said, it's the heartbeat. For me, it's also the gatekeepers for an organization, who bring in the right information and display it to the whole organization what people want. Moving forward, Chidan, from your perspective as well, please.
I like the wording of the gatekeeper because I exactly think the same for the demand planning roles, because they are the first people that can sense the demand and the trends of the market. And just as an example, as Bashir said, now we are saying that the sustainable materials, etc., they are the first one who got the request or sense checks of these sustainable materials in the marketplace. If they don't, for example, don't reflect this information transparently to the rest of the organization, you can be, how you said, you can be very old style in the way of procurement, in the way of management, etc. So it is like an alarm that what market is going forward, and then you need to pass it, of course, to the right people and the right platform to take actions. Most of the things are said, but again, for demand planning, one of the key things is communication. So you really need to understand the facts behind your demand, because supply chain is, very critical to have the wrong effects of fake moments. I will give an example from my experience. One of our customers started to buy double of their volume in couple of months, and first month we considered that it is an increased demand, it is a one-off order, etc., and we build the stock. The second month we were still going on producing the things, but then we said that, hey, what's something going on wrong here, because we know their history was very constant, etc., but suddenly something changed. And then we organized the meetings with customer in order to understand the effect, because supply chain is very open to have the bullwhip effect. Customer can suddenly left with stock, you can suddenly left with stock, and your suppliers can left with stock with some wrong information. So we recognize that our customer is implementing SAP in their systems, and because of that, there are some wrong calculations. Because of that, so there are some wrong stock movements, etc. And we recognize that their all orders in the past month was just a mistake. And whenever you got this information, you revise all your plans, you do all your resource plannings, etc. again, and correct all the history according to this fact. This means that, being open with the customers, being open with the suppliers, transparent in your operations, always ends with the good quality of stocks and service. For example, if we would go on with this production maybe for 3 months more, let's say, everyone would be affected very negatively in this scenario. So if there is a demand that we need to investigate, etc., we need to communicate, we need to investigate all the things behind it. So we can make mistakes. Also, about our mistakes, we need to be transparent, because we learn as long as we learn from our mistakes, that's also a great lesson, actually. So that is what I want to add. The others are all said.
Thank you, Chidan. I think you touched a very important topic of bullwhip, and that is that if the supply chain, and especially demand planning, is not proactive in identifying the surges or the volatility in the the information flow, organization, they go through a whirlwind kind of a spiral down effect that they do all the wrong planning because of one wrong, input in the plan. And we as supply chain professionals or demand planners, we need to be very careful about not to introduce or to understand the pattern and to ensure that bullwhip does not come into play at all for the organization. Thank you, Chetan. Now, coming next to our next topic that is related to, I would like to understand from you guys that what are the key elements to demand planning, and from your experience, from your professional experience, what are the challenges that you have faced in demand planning over your career? So I would place this question to again to Imran. Sorry.
Okay, so as we were discussing that, demand planning basically is a process. The key elements that it depends how you want to see it. It starts off with a process where you have to link up with your sales and marketing to understand the market demand. You have to have a link with your customer and consumer. That is the first brick in the process, based on which you develop your assumptions, based on which you develop all of the history. That's the first step in any demand planning process, to get you basically a baseline of how your product have been selling based on the history, based on statistical or different models, whatever you want to run. The second process, again, in consumer industry specifically, is around trade promotions. What are the things that would basically impact your baseline, whether it's seasonality, whether it's trade promotions, whether it's some kind of discounting, or and outliers like SAP implementation, as Chidam was sharing early on. And then eventually you get to an agreed unconstrained demand plan number. These are the critical elements to build basically a number. The other thing that is very, very important is, in terms of organization and in terms of demand planning, what needs to be understood is that this is not just a mathematical process. Demand planning is a behavioral based process. Yes. It is not just that you implement one of the systems and things will change in a jiffy. You have to have a behavioral change throughout the organization, so that there is a belief that this is a system. Again, this is a process which is a business process, not a supply chain specific process. So the challenges I have faced personally is mostly around behavior. So I have come to realize that demand planning is more art than science, in somewhat way, at least in the age that we are operating on. It varies. It is highly dependent on the relationships that you carry within the organization. It varies between the top level of commitment, whether your business leader really believes in it and really think that this is something that should be given importance, etc. So from my perspective, these are the challenges that I have personally faced, to basically convince people that yes, if you implement this, it is going to really, really change the way you do business. How can you extract value out of it? Getting that communication through, getting them to understand the impacts that this could bring in onto the table, have been the challenges throughout the demand planning process, irrespective of the organization that I've faced.
Thank you, Imran. Thank you. I would request Chetan, if you can also share your perspective on the key elements and challenges.
Yeah. I want to say that actually, as Imran said, it is a discipline actually. I mean, it is about how you make judgments about the future, etc. But also it is about how you clean the data about your history as well. You need to always, eliminate the data that is polluting the history, etc. You need to always keep your eyes on your data, but also beside that, this it is not a static job that you need to sit on your desk and do the maths, etc. You always need to be in communication with your customers. Customers can be your warehouse, customers can be your distribution center, customers can be the final customers, but you need to communicate. Any kind of information can be really important for the demand planning. And also, for example, in the textile, I am in the textile sector, so we are always, the customer always say that, oh, we don't know what we will produce because we will get the forecast of the thread, of the slivers, of these final parts very, very late, because of the designer will decide at the end of the design process, etc. We always hear about it, but even this is the truth. We also need to give any information to our partners as much as possible, because as at the end of the day, this kind of information, even it is not, don't know the shade, you don't know the size of the things, etc., but at least we can sense check our resource planning, we can sense check our labor planning, etc. So any kind of information is important for demand planning, we need to keep in mind. And also, this collaboration part, I think, other than estimating according to history, etc., as much as possible, we need to try to build some collaborations with our customers as well. There are some EDI systems that we are commonly using with our customers, etc. We need to keep our eyes on our systems in order to ensure that they are working properly. So demand planning is not a static job. You should always look for how to improve your work, actually, how to improve your output, how to minimize your errors, etc. So I think about the demand planners, this is one of the challenge, because then when they start to work on statistics, etc., they are always trying to become perfect. And then sometimes while trying to become perfect, they are losing so much time on some details, but sometimes missing the big picture behind the scenarios, So, and also, sensing the environment is also a challenge. The political situations, social situations, social trends. For example, we talk about paying more for sustainable products. These are all social trends and social changes recently happening. So I think demand planners should be, again, a gatekeeper about these changes, requests raising around the company.
Thank you. Please continue. Sorry, please continue.
So other than thinking it as a static job, we should be, thinking as a gatekeeper to have a holistic view about the changes in our environments.
Fine. Thank you, Chidan. I would take some points from you and also from what Imran said, that yes, it's a business process, and a key element to that is the behavior. My first exposure to demand planning was when I joined Course Pakistan as a planning manager. Fine, and there was a big gap between what the numbers were being shown and what the actual sales out was happening. There was a very big gap in that. And what I learned from that was that we cannot just rely on the numbers. We have to go to the origin of those numbers as well. And the thing that I tried to implement was that I started meeting up with my sales team, with the top key customers as well, to understand them. So as Imran said, that behavior is a behavioral topic. For me, one of the key elements is that there should be a trust level to it. I think that was you should not have removed Chidan. We need an introduction.
Yes. She is one of the next generation supply chain lady.
Supply chain. Mashallah, beautiful.
Thank you.
Coming back, that there should also be a certain trust level as well, that with the customers as well. As you also mentioned, as Imran also mentioned, that they need to understand that it's not about giving us firm numbers, but actually at least letting us understand what the trends may be, especially in the textile sector, which is a very dependent on the fashion trends as well. And you talked about shades and the material, what kind of every 3 months the fashion trend changes in the textile sector. So, but that is where a close coordination, a good trust level, and a good behavioral interaction is key to demand planning. So, thank you. So that was kind of my 2 cents into it. Now I would ask Mr. Bashir if he can also share his input.
No, excellent. I think so. They explained Imran and Lady explained really, really very well. So nothing. So I can only divide because for the in a very basic form for the listeners or people who are watching this basically webinar, that you can elements of demand planning can be divided into three, four parts. Number one is the people, very important. So what kind of organization you have, people are trained, they can manage things, they can understand. Is the process. Number two, the process is robust enough to basically capture all the basically areas which require to be captured in the demand planning. And the information, the kind of data, the credibility of the data, which data they are using, they are credible enough, and the technology of the system. So people process information in the system. So what kind of technology or system they're using? And the last, not the least, that the performance management. How they are driving the performance management through this process. So number one, because the demand forecast owned by the business or not, this is the organization. So people are using, they are accountable and they are working closely with the sales and marketing to prepare a most realistic or robust forecast so that they can hand over to supply chain so that they can plan their operation. Demand planning systems, so they have robust or technologically sound systems. They can basically nowadays, right now, MI is there, artificial intelligence is there, so they are demand sensing is there, short term, long term, so the visibility and demand planning, the base process there are how many times they are updating the data, how many times in a month they are generating their forecast, how many times they are cleaning their data. So what is the scope of their forecast, how long they go into that, are they covering the longest lead time of raw material or not, are they taking care of that horizon, is taking care of the capacity planning or not, manufacturing planning or not, because 12 to 24 months or not. This is what my point is, what is. And then when they are talking to marketing and sales, are they are discussing the promotions, new innovations, they are phasing in, phasing out properly or not. So the marketing assumptions are being pulled together or not. They are taking some seasonality effect or not. So the customer and channel specific intelligence being taken into consideration or not. So all these things, and they have a proper ERP, not only the demand planning system, but the enterprise resource planning system, whereby they are integrated with all the function, whether it's be it a finance, whether it's a supply chain, whether it's a marketing. So they should be integrated. So, and then the master data is very, very critical because master data, I mean that the right product is being mapped to the right warehouse or not, to right product category or not, at the lowest level or not, what's the granularity, so how they are updating. So are we documenting the assumptions? So what we are making, the changes. So these are the all. And what are we doing with the KPIs? So the biggest challenge with the KPIs, I go back that if your forecasting performance going haywire, so if you're not taking any actions or adjusting your forecast with the plans or targets, then you are not doing the justification with the entire demand planning. So I can share I use basically in all my meetings with my sales and marketing teams and the business leaders, the definition of insanity of the Einstein, that if is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. If you're not addressing the root cause or not using the underlying basically insights, the insights are not being used to improve your process, then companies should not expect a different results. Imran touched about very important point of the challenges. One of that is I call it as target versus forecast mindset. So I define, because very clearly, target, budget, plan. So forecast is based on your actual performance, your activities and assumption in hand, and the current trends. What is your robust or very likelihood outcome? What is your latest view? Whereas target, something is coming from the top. We understand we all has to achieve those things. So, but till the time we are not accepting or not realizing that these are the two different figures. The forecast is one set of numbers and target is another set of numbers, and difference between the two is the gap. So if we keep on bridging the gap by maintaining the forecast at the same level, then we are not going to expect different results. We keep on going down the drain. So this is the biggest challenge beside others, the mindset of target versus forecast. So, and then is a communication as a demand planning manager in this challenge is very, very important, how they are communicating this impact. So if till the time you are not able to tag this challenge with some financial numbers, because how your forecast biases or inaccuracies impacting the financial performance, your turnovers, your gross margins, your cost to service, you have to have some business acumen. So you have to communicate in a proper manner to the leadership team that this is the biggest challenge of the organization. Rest other challenges, for example, we don't have a proper systems, we are overreacting to the last month performance, analysis, paralysis, too many data streams, different hierarchies, so many SKUs, what if scenarios, using legacy process, using new process. What is the best data? We're going to use the invoice data. Are we going to the customers' orders data? So these challenges can easily be addressed through putting up a right systems or putting up the right people. But this mindset challenge is really, really very difficult. Till the time you need to explain properly in by basically adding this thing with the financial targets, you will basically not able to achieve any benefit out of this. This is it from myself.
Thank you, Bashir. Thank you. Definitely, again, you provide a very good perspective into the challenges, and rightly so. And as I said at the start, that I would also be participating this session as a student as well. So I'm getting my full worth out of this. So thank you.
Norman, can
my
I add?
Yes, please.
Can I add some points here? As Bashar said about the challenges of gap analysis, also one of the things I see as a gap in the demand planning side, they need to understand the innovation initiatives and the new product launches, because if they are not aware of the new products coming, when it will come, when it will be launched to the market, etc., then it can mislead to the business to different, or wrong situations. So in the gap analysis, we need to understand the effect of the new product launches. This is one point I want to add. And also about the challenges, I think, as Bashar said, it was a really good point about the last minute or reactive changes in the demand side. I think the companies really need to build their frozen periods, slushy period and liquid period about the demand planning. So this should be a discipline, and the companies should define these periods according to their product and supply lead times. So it means that, for example, if your lead time is, for example, 2 weeks, then it doesn't mean anything to change your 2 months. If it doesn't mean anything to change the forecast right now, right? So because you will not be able to supply the goods in 2 months. So according to your lead time, with the support of management, you should really define this time horizon, time fence of your demand planning cycles. Because what I see in the systems, people are revising the forecast whenever they see a trend or change, and then they are saying that, hey, my forecast accuracy was really high, but you couldn't supply on time. It doesn't mean anything for the business at the end of the day. So we really need to pause some period in order to let planners to supply these goods on time. I think this is one of the key challenges to explain this to the sales and marketing and also the business. Because at the end of the day, forecast accuracy means nothing if you cannot supply on time, right? We are not doing something for the hitting the KPIs, etc. So we need to bear this in mind.
Thank you, Chidam, for your add-on. So now we looked into the key elements and the challenges. Now, my next question to all three of you is basically a little add-on to the same discussion, that what techniques or methods should professionals or demand planners engage in or utilize to formulate the right demand plan? So I would request again on this, if sorry, if Chetan, you can provide your kind input on this.
I cannot mention about a tool or technique that will fit to everything as handy solution. So, it will depend on your product groups according to their lead times, according to their product life cycles. For example, if it is in a new launch period, it is something different. If it is in a mature product, it is something different. So it really depends on your product. So, but just as I mentioned, what I see in the planners, when they are dealing with the numbers, very, small numbers and digging into details, sometimes they are missing these trends situations or the seasonal situations. And also because of the world is changing, I mean, either, because of the sustainability requirements or also climate changes, even the seasonality is changing. So, for example, when we said that, for example, the summers are June, July, August, it is not June, July, August anymore, for example. So, in order to understand these kind of changes in advance, you shouldn't, dig into too much detail and get lost there, but a bit look from the big picture and understand what is going on in your business. And also, as you mentioned, Norman, I mean, I'm also recommending all the demand planners, to join as much as meetings with the customers in order to understand what is going on there and what we can how we can help them in order to supply better and also improve our revenues, profits, and service levels. So being with the customers, etc., is really critical. And also understanding your products is also a key, because for example, after COVID situation, we all face the period that demand can be there but the supply is not there anymore. Some kind of cases like this. In these cases, what you need to do, you need to prioritize your demand. You need to sometimes influence your demand. For example, direct your customer to different alternative products, different alternative solutions, etc. So other than hand solution, I can give this kind of advices, to be honest.
Thank you, Chid. Thank you on your input. Bashir, if you may also provide your input on this.
Sure, Naman, because I think so. Chetan has explained really, really very well. So what needs to be considered when basically what techniques or methods come in handy in formulating the right demand forecast. But because I keep it very simple, because there are so many advanced techniques and tools and methods are available to formulate the right demand. But I will suggest a very, very basic one, because that captures the entire spectrum. So take around the last 12 to 24 months of the history, add in that history is a change, and that's become your forecast. It's not very easy the way I'm saying, because so now people is going to ask, yes, I have a last 12 months and 24 months of the history, my product portfolios or services, but what is the change? So change, I have divided change into three groups, three categories. Rightly said by Chetan, is the trend plus seasonality and activities, those activities or areas delivering more or less than last year or last 24 months. So we need to be very, very mindful that. So that these three things are the change. So trend, as explained that I explained trend as that if we are not doing anything in terms of activities or promotions, then what would be the forecast look like? Because what would be the basically forecast look like without doing anything? So in this area, we have to look into the broader economic forces that drive your business. So those typically called as drivers, which basically help to basically generate a forecast. So, and where your sales that you have no control over, because internally we don't have a control on that. Because, but we need to pick up the most relevant drivers which are relevant to your industry in which you are operating. So, what are the economic indicators? What's the per capita income? What are the competition going to do some activities? Any government's legislations which are going to impact you? For example, in the days of Unilever, we have a consumer panel data, we have a basically retail audit data, new shops are coming, new trends are coming. So we basically call that as a trend. So and then seasonality, very very clear, because so in this back home we have a different seasons. So, for example, for the agriculture products, there are agriculture seasons. Over here, where you have a long holidays in the Middle East right now, particularly Saudi Arabia, two Eids, Eid al-Adha and Eid al-Fitr, because they closed down for around good 10 days, both the Eids. So all the markets have been closed down, and the Hajj season is different also. In Chinese New Year in China, so these are the winter, summer, snow, rainy. So all those seasons, so you can check seasonality and build into your historical numbers. Use this so that you can come up with a forecast. And next point, which is I called areas or activities delivering more or less than last year or last 24 months. I call that levers, which are particularly in control with that. So we need to clearly these activity plans need to be clear and concise, and that demand planners are dependent on those activities from sales and marketing. So these needs to be clearly indicate what and how much they will deliver over a last year. So marketing can come up with that. So what is their target to come up with this activities? So those activities, if they are not going to deliver any volume or gross margin, needs to be also clearly differentiated. The activity plans, there are some, I give you some general basically areas which covers this: your pricing, what pricing you want to maintain, how many promotion you are doing, is a consumer promotion or trade promotion, so product changes, you're coming with innovations, so customer changes, new customers are coming in, old customers leaving you, so your distribution width or depth. So these are the each and every general category may have one or more set of activities that needs to be listed. So demand planners should list all those activities. So what is the time frame in which period of the year we're going to perform these activities? What are the gross margins or volume expectation from that? So how much investments go behind that? So, but be careful, activities influencing last year, because that's the cleaning of data is also very important. If you perform the same activities last year, you have to clean all those activities from your last year. So this is a very humble suggestion that you take historical data, add your basically change and your demand plan. Change consists of trend, seasonalities, and areas delivering more or less than last year. And this is also called as assumptions. Levers and drivers are your assumptions. You need to document and capture so that at the later stage, you can pinpoint in case of success or failure, you can pinpoint those activities or assumptions they are performing or not performing, rather pinpointing on individuals. These are the behavioral aspects come into play in demand planner's life. So to avoid those wrong behaviors, so we should be documenting all assumptions so that we can pinpoint the assumptions are wrong. People are not wrong because market is changing day by day very rapidly. So this is a little bit of humble suggestion to answer this question.
Thank you, Bashir. Imran, your 2 cents on it, your input.
I think both Bashir and Chidam have kind of brought that how to formulate the right demand plan. I would not go in such details, but maybe I want to say a couple of things, the techniques that have come in handy for myself in terms of my experience. So I would divide it into two sections. Number one is, this is again a suggestion for all demand planners, that they need to talk in business language. They cannot be seen as supply chain or planning individuals. We all the demand planners have this tendency to get geeky around the data, which sales and marketing cannot interpret. So what sales and marketing and the business people need to understand and need to feel that the demand planners are basically an enabler for the business. So talk in business language, valorize the inaccuracy, that how much, or for example, if what would happen if they improve the accuracy. You have to valorize it. You have to talk in their language. If you talk that if you do this, I might face a labor issue, they would never understand that what is the importance of getting a better forecast. So again, talk in business language, valorize the inaccuracy that they are bringing into the channel. Be seen as an enabler, be seen that we want to work together for this gap management, as Bashir was earlier saying, that there is a budget number and then there is a forecast number. If you are seen as a person who's just highlighting the gap, then you would be seen as negative. We need to change ourselves, that we are enabler, that how do we bring that gap together rather than just pointing out the inefficiencies into the system. So that's one section of what I would recommend. The second is that use the technology for your advantage. Again, in last 10 years, things have changed so much. I remember running baseline on a single regression model would take 4 hours to run. Right now, you can run on 3 years history, 12 different algorithms, and where system will calculate the inaccuracy against each of the algorithm and tell you which algorithm is the best one to use, almost in a real-time basis. So use that technology in terms of formulating the right demand plan. There are a few other things. Again, do not have some segmentation within the supply chain. You don't have we don't have to put attention on the smaller SKUs as much as we have to do on a bigger impacting SKUs or the product group, or however you want to segment it. So segment your supply chain. Do the analysis on multi-echelon. Something that I found very useful was that when I was looking at a weekly basis, things were very different and very patchy, very noisy. But when you aggregate these things, sometimes it all starts to make sense. So use these technology and use these how do I say techniques to your advantage. And last but not the least is which Bashir have said, that your demand is as good as your assumptions. So if your assumptions are strong, which means that you have documented that what is driving the assumption, what are the demand drivers in your demand forecast, that is the third key of getting into the right demand plan. So that's how I would summarize the overall subject.
Thank you, Imran. Thank you. So now we have discussed about the demand planning, about the methods, the challenges, and everything. Now I would like to move towards more current topics and how they are affecting us. So the next topic I would like to touch is regarding what we have all gone through and we have seen over the last so many months, 5 to 6 months, that the impact of this pandemic, the COVID, and it has tested the best of the best organizations. It has changed our thinking process as well, how we look at things. So as demand planners, what are the lessons learned during this COVID, during the lockdown, during this pandemic? So I would request Bashir, if you may start on this, please.
Very, very difficult question, Numan, because yes, the best of the best organizations are being tested, and the energy and oil gas industries are being, I think, most affected industry in this time, because there's airline industries are not moving, they're not consuming fuels. Your basically hotel industries is down. So there are your lockdown situations. Your vehicles were not moving on the road. Only the food industries, basically, I think they have seen surge. So they, all the industries being tested in this unprecedented impact on the consumer demand, and we have seen the shifts in the buying channels also. So so most forecasting models couldn't adapt fast enough to keep up, leaving shelves empty in the case of higher demand, and the huge stocks are piled up with the warehouses where there's a no demand, the consumer fuming and sales was dropping. So they are the so some so few industries, for example, I know I worked with that. They have what they did, how they tackled, and how demand planner should tackle. Because number one thing, the teamwork. Because uh, teamwork, that we should have established SNOP process in the organization, and so which allow them to more readily pivot. So they have to basically keep on showing flexibility with the changes. So SNOP process should be used as a war game, war room, so that we can everybody should together and rediscuss the with the changes assumption. And beyond that, a culture that enabled agility. That after all, effective demand forecasting isn't just about technology and algorithms. It's also about teamwork, transparency, and trust. So teamwork is very, very important, that cross-functional dialogue, because your sales team is talking to your customers directly. They are coming with the new basically challenges, where the lockdowns are there or not, what the demand is, which are areas being locked, how many basically extended sales team are affected. So you should rely on the information so that you can keep on changing your forecast accordingly. Uh, so you basically keep on reflecting your new information into your forecast so that you can build on that. Number two, you should have a modernized example systems with you, which can incorporate, as Imran has mentioned, that he has seen the beautiful systems they can build around. They can do a demand sensing on 3 years of history in a blink of an eye. They can give you a right forecast accuracy. You have to rely on those systems. So because we should not be doing analysis accuracy individually. And the transparency, we discussed in detail transparency. Effective teamwork requires transparency of demand forecasting assumptions. So inputs, methodology, outputs, accuracy, inventory, and supplier capacity. Without transparency, it is very difficult. It is impossible to achieve any. So to achieve alignment behind a single forecast, you need all these things. And the trust. So teamwork and transparency, you will come up with the trust on the team you're working in each other, data, predictive analytics, process, and ultimately in the results. So you can data sharing and access are foundational to demand forecasting, and the trust can be built in several key areas of those processes. So you need to rely on these three things, which is I also practically implemented. So teamwork with the cross-functional teams, new information, new things, transparency, because we are having a clarity of the information, what is happening at the marketplace, how we need to react, and whether there's a bull effect or not, we need to take that out, and the trust. These are the three things I can mention on that.
Thank you, Bashir, for your input. And you mentioned that regarding the food industry, that there were some positives probably because the demand was there. But I would like to hear from the horse's mouth, not exactly, but Imran, you come from the dairy industry. You are more linked and in tune with the food and FMCG industry. So what is your input? How did this industry react, and what were the impacts and the lessons learned during this pandemic?
So I agree with Bashir that probably other industries were more impacted in terms of, totality, in terms of numbers, maybe in terms of business performance, but food industry was equally impacted, I would say. The impact was different. The impact was that suddenly demand was coming from an altogether different channel, altogether different format. So for example, if a company operates on a food service model, all the restaurants were closed, but there was in-home, which was increasing. So the challenge was there, but it was a different kind of challenge. It was that one business is not performing at all, and the other business is having that bull effect. So again, from overall industry point of view, it was, I think, challenging across the board. The lesson learned, I would say, is that it is really, really important how close you are to the market. What my few thing is that the best of the best demand planners, it doesn't matter how great algorithms or how best systems they have. What was more important that how close they are to their sales and marketing people, and how close the sales and marketing people are with their customers. So that just to understand that what is going on. And again, it comes out to the granularity and the assumptions that your demand planner was based on. So again, giving the same example, you have customers in your food service section and you have your customers in your consumer section. Now, even the food service is bifurcated into so many different channels. There is, for example, if I go to Saudi, there's a small tea shops, there is, high-end restaurants, there is, mediocre restaurants, there are in delivery, there's Zomatos of the world, or Talabat or Food Pandas of the world as well. So if your forecast is built into that granularity, then you can quickly switch, and then you can quickly check that what is the strength. For example, again, that you find out that suddenly that that the top end restaurants are suddenly closed. If your forecast is built in a way that it enables you to go and say that, okay, this section would be zero, how much was coming for this section and how much is coming from the delivery section, then you can easily adapt. So the granularity is important. How close you are to market, how close you are to your consumers, very, very important. Agility, as Bashir was saying, that the teamwork, how agile your teams were. Did they take it as a challenge instead of having it once a month or once a week, where they're meeting on a daily basis to understand what is happening and updating the system so that it has a long-term impact. So these were the three key inputs. And last one I wanted to mention, I'm not sure whether it's specifically for demand plan, but what I found out overall in supply chain is that efficiency is super overrated. What matters is effectiveness. As a team, how effective you are. You can be absolute efficient person, but if you are not effective, then this kind of COVID situation, you won't be able to. You are vulnerable in that sense. So that would be my couple of cents.
Thank you. Imran, agree with you. I think not just effectiveness and efficiency. I think it's what my experience is that the resilience of supply chains.
Correct.
And also not just resilience. When we talk about resilience, we also need to talk and understand from and need to appreciate from the fact that that are there enough redundancies built into your supply chain to
Correct.
make your supply chain resilient to such things. And you from the FMCG sector, and not just the pandemic, I think you would have also experienced the impact of the 1st July, the 15% VAT when it was implemented. In Saudi, the time frame given for that implementation, the announcement was done on 12th of May, I believe, or somewhere. And the reaction time was very less for the organization. And yet there was a big surge in demand. When I talked to a lot of people from not just the food FMCG, the automobile industry, they were sold out. All their stocks were sold out because of the 15% VAT. So, and that was unprecedented as well. So I think Saudi's phase two dynamics or two volatilities that the pandemic and also the 15% VAT impact as well.
We were contacted, Noman, by a customer saying that they want to airport 6 A380s of food to one of the markets during the COVID times.
Okay.
just sharing the overall impact and the grand and basically the, how do you say, the overall impact of the change it was. Yeah, but absolutely, it depends, how resilient you are, how closely you want to get, and then eventually execute things. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Chetan, your input from your textile perspective as well, please.
It is, I will start with the supply chain side, not just demand planning. I think in this period, the importance of supply chain risk management was very, very important. I mean, we, we, for example, a couple of years ago, we were talking about how S&OP process is important, how we need to improve it, etc. I think now the time of this supply chain risk management needs to be in discussion, how to improve it. Because we shouldn't see the supply chain risk management as an exercise that we need to complete as the plan A, plan B, etc. But also we need to work on some scenarios like optimistic scenarios, pessimistic scenarios, and most likely scenarios. Because when we see a risk, for example, for Turkey, maybe an earthquake was a risk, for example, maybe some can be some war risks, etc., whatever the situation is. But also we saw that risk can be global. So this was nothing that we think about earlier. So we need to have a process, monthly basis. We are going through these plans and updating the risk levels, risk situations, and the action plans. This is one thing I can say, but it is mainly about, of course, demand planning, because it will affect the demand planning directly. And also the online channels started to be one thing to be careful, because some of the products have online channels, some of the products may not have the online channels. So this can change the demand history slightly. So we need to be careful in this while doing the future planning. So also, as Bashar said, Imran said, an agile, efficient teamwork is critical, because maybe you were doing once a month your plan and relying on that plan. Now you need to revise your plan or go through your plan weekly basis, sometimes daily basis, etc. So an agile team is a must. And as I mentioned earlier, as we all discussed, collaboration and communication with all parties is the key. With COVID, it is getting more and more important. As I said, it is not a job that you can sit in your desk and do with your math only. So communication and collaboration is the key. This is what I want to add. That others are all said.
Thank you. Thank you, Chetan, for your input. And my next question, I will link it with your response. You talked about understanding that some products would have an online channel and online flow as well. So I think COVID also redefined or made organization look at their business model, reinvent their business model as well to allow them to continue their operations. And a lot of things move towards online e-commerce and everything. So my question, Imran, I would put this to you to start off with, that within your industry, what has the impact been? How has the business models impacted? Has there been any change to it? And again, how has demand planning embraced those changes?
So as you know, probably every single one experienced that, especially in FMCG sector. Obviously, the e-com sector came with a boom. People who wanted to stay back, they were more and more going to online kind of a platform. But one thing which was very eye-opening for us was that it really differs from place to place. For example, if you see Saudi Arabia, in Saudi Arabia, going for shopping, going to a mall is not just shopping. It's an experience that the families goes for. So there was definitely a change where e-com became super important. The focus has come, especially in UAE, there were mushroom players who went on, but the base is so small that the change was not impactful. It is impactful, but not in the short term. I think in going forward in a year or so, it is going to increase into much bigger. But places like Saudi Arabia were not that impacted, because for them it's probably a family outing where it's the experience that people want to go for the shopping. That's a weekly ritual that connects probably dads with their kids, etc., kind of a thing. So definitely there is a change in terms of channel, in terms of the routes that people were taking. A lot of, again, food service people have ventured into, because the restaurants were closed, they ventured into in-home cooking, in-home high-end kind of products were available. So definitely the e-com sector overall has seen a change. The other thing in terms of demand planning, I think the only thing that is keeping demand planning from going highly technology oriented is the availability of data. And as soon as the data is available, which has basically accelerated by this COVID change, is the demand planning is going to change the landscape of demand planning altogether. Right now, we are talking since the start of this webinar around transparency, around the availability, how XYZ demand planner has to act as a neutral, party. Once, just imagine if the data is available, your tertiary point of sale is available, your actual consumer data is available, then you won't need any of this. It will basically be analyzed, and we are seeing already glimpses of it, where the real job of demand planning would be to add value in terms of gap management, in terms of suggestion, in terms of recommendation, etc. So again, business model definitely were altered depending on industry to industry. E-com is coming. It's a force that has to be reckoned with. It has started that change. It has basically ignited. COVID has ignited that change depending on industry. For food industry, it's still not that active, and depending on the part of the region where you work on. But overall, I think it is going to alter the change that more and more percentage will go towards the online route in terms of the shopping.
Okay. Thank you. Chetan, I would appreciate if you can add on to this.
Yes, as Imran said, one of the biggest change that we saw that online is one of the most important tools that we need to invest on. So this is one thing, and also, for example, with some of the customers, we have these EDI systems, etc., that works for data transfers. But I think it is seen that how it is critical to get the data directly from customer themselves, other than trying to make assumptions about the future, especially in this exceptional periods, let's say. And other than seeing the customer as a customer itself, actually, we try to see our customer as a partner. So how we can help each other, how we can serve them, how we can help them. So try to give service to them with our products wherever we can supply, and how soon we can supply, and which alternative products we can supply. So we started to focus on this way, actually, because of the short supplies or longer lead times, or the issues that we face with. So trying to find the different alternatives for our customers, actually trying to not to stop their business in a way. So it started to be not selling the product, but servicing as much as we can, not to stop them and help them. So it started to be like a collaboration thing, as I mentioned, Noman, between the customers and the suppliers, all from all perspective of supply chain.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you, Chetan. On the last input from Bashir on this point.
So I think it's a very good question. So the impact, I'll explain that, yes, the models are being redefined. The redefinition of the model is largely because dependent on the leadership team, for example. So, because with this unprecedented situations, targets are being changed for the organizations. Whatever being targets were there in March to have a turnover growth or bottom line growth, the targets are being changed to different basically KPIs. So, and that define the, I can say that scope for demand planning, how to adjust, because whether few companies were targeting the working capital for their target, few companies are targeting cash for their target, few companies were basically stopping the overdues, the collection from the market. So that's entirely changed the scenario because it's all of a sudden things get stopped. So the clarity needs to be because provided to down the line, what is the new target? That's the very important first point, I think. So I have basically experience in working one of the best multinationals, and the leadership team's first of all responsibility to communicate the revised target to the team down the line, and then you start building your demand plan accordingly. The linkage between, because demand plan and the business is very critical. So if the priorities of the business get changed, your modeling and the demand planning assumption keep on changing. So my learning is, so if you change the target to clearly communicated, then things get very, very easy. Yes, the loads of data for demand planning, because is what my humble suggestion to the demand planners. So we start to predict more behaviors. So we should move beyond single number forecast by identifying a range of outcomes and the probability of each of those outcomes occurring. So we should not be saying that my forecast is X number. Rather, we have a scenarios. So if I can see recovery or market's going to open up within 3 months' time, this would be my demand plan. If market's going to open up in 6 months' time, this is my demand plan. If market's going to open up in 2 months' time, this is demand number 3. So you need to move on to the scenario building. Very important. We need to better predict the unpredictable by factoring in the key casual data, including your promotions, social media, very important, your weather, new product introductions, whether you would like to do promotions. Also, I seen changing promotions. For example, they are supporting customers with the hygienes, with the disinfectants. So they are supporting with those materials. So rather giving a gift to travel to any other part of the world to see Formula One, to watch football matches. So they are disinfecting the workshops, they are disinfecting the shops, providing more basically hygiene kits for their employees. So these promotions keep on changing. You need to incorporate those promotions accordingly. So leverage automation to model the probability of deviation from your demand forecast more easily. So that the automation or the new technologies are very important in this. Basically, this is the learning and the modeling needs to be done that. So you need to then tap into the power of machine learning to continuously improve your demand model. So that's going to help you to continuously improve your demand model. So then protecting against the surprise is the other bit, because which is very important. So we need to, as I explained, then we need to revisit the service objectives for a product and markets. So that should be linked with your business objective. So whether you like to minimize the working capital, you would like to maximize the margin, reduce the obsolescence risk, or more. So these should be linked with that. So you are protecting yourself with these surprises. So determine the optimal safety stock to hedge against uncertainty while meeting service levels, because redefine services. In the same manner, so we would like to keep on reducing your forecast by eliminating the inevitable inconsistencies and errors created by human intervention. So rely on the computer. So you need to close to the market, you need to understand the data and address accordingly, and perform more efficiently and effectively. Imran basically previously said that effectiveness is very, very important. So you need to reduce because there are some cost cuts. So you need how to reduce your further logistic costs to determine the most efficient way of possible to move products from end to end your supply chain. More efficient production schedules by taking into account capacity constraints and that. These are basic things. And you can add a more dollar to your bottom line by reducing excess inventory and minimizing losses from product obsolescence. So these are the few points which in my personal opinion, which is going to help the demand planners and to basically whatever the changing models are there. So clarity is that from the leadership team, your clarity in the target, that's very important. That's going to drive the entire organization towards what exactly you would like to achieve and how you would like to achieve that.
Thank you, Bashir, for your input. I think the next, all three of you mentioned during your talks, Imran previously gave the examples of algorithms, and Chidan was talking about the EDI interfaces, and Bashir, you also mentioned on the machine learning and technology. So my next question, basically, as we move forward, is that now it's the age of digitization. We are talking about blockchains, IoTs, everything. So from your experience, what are now the current and future trends in demand planning, which will support demand planning as we move forward? So to start off with this, Chidan, if you can help us appreciate what technologies are there now or coming forward to support demand.
Yeah, especially demand-driven modelings are becoming very popular. But as Bashir said, one of the key also is machine learning and artificial intelligence techniques. Actually, these are really important because you know that people, women is in a tendency of some positive or negative bias all the time. So they see the history, and about the future they can have some optimistic plans or ideas, or pessimistic plans and ideas. And when you see the demand cycle and the actual demands, you always see a bias in a positive way or negative way. And also, if whoever the demand planner is changed, also the bias change again. So there is no controllable bias, let's say. It is totally depend on human at the end of the day. And machine learning and artificial intelligence kind of programs will definitely minimize this kind of human errors, of course. But of course, the judgment of people will be still valid in the future. I mean, the trends of the world and the changes in the environments, etc., still will be important. But I always say, I mean, to the demand planners, if you have no judgment about the future, or if you have no information about the trends, about now or the future, then always rely on the history. History is really good to start for estimation of the future. When you see the existing advanced planning systems, actually, even you don't touch to the current system, or even you don't put anything, their forecast accuracies are up to 90% already. So you already need to rely on the history as much as possible, rely on the computer results, but of course search for the better technologies that is rising up nowadays. It will be really important. I mean, machine learning also will be very important about the lead time calculations as well, because when we are doing the demand planning or the supply planning, we are generally relying on the fixed data of lead times from our suppliers for our deliveries, warehouses, and shipments. Also, machine learning will be very important about this. I mean, according to the historical data, it is already started. There are now technologies that it is calculating the live data and updating the lead times of the raw material suppliers, updating the lead time of warehouse deliveries, etc. This will improve our service, and also this will improve our forecast accuracy if we use in a proper way with efficient team, as Bashar and Imran said. Here, the most important thing will be, how much you will invest on this kind of technologies. I mean, how frequently you will collect the live data from the point of use, and also how frequently you will change your models, etc. This will be the discussion point, and we will be building experiences and exports on these kind of things in the future. Now, for example, let's say that in the time of COVID situation, let's say, if we use our fixed data from one country to other country, like 7 days a week, let's say, but because of the custom procedures, etc., maybe it became 2-3 weeks, right? So all the lead time situations is changed. So the artificial intelligence will always, consider the lead data. So it will also increase your lead time horizons, which will affect directly your service levels and accuracy of your plans. So it is going to be the key how to manage this, and also to define the data points. I mean, which data points we will use in our systems, and how frequently we will update them. So these will be the key areas for us to manage and decide.
Okay. Thank you, Chidan, for your input on this. So I'd request Bashir, if you may add on to what Chidan said on the technology trends in demand planning.
Yes, digitization is on the corner because it's coming and coming very, very fast. And I can say this thing because with this digitization, demand planning will become more strategic rather the reactive modeling to move into the strategic level. Digitization of demand planning is becoming imperative for organization that want to say the companies would like to stay ahead of competitions or basically drive more profits. This is imperative. So demand planning is no longer a case of simply reacting. Instead, it requires a continuously, proactively to successfully predict demand in line with this artificial intelligence. So I keep on insisting that now artificial intelligence is becoming an intrinsic part of the demand planning function, further boosting the planning accuracy through sensing the market desires. So why I'm saying the strategic decision making? So if AI drives automation of more traditional and labor intensive tasks, which demand planners used to perform nowadays, so then the next level is most notably analyzing and interpreting batches of data, which we used to do that. AI easily and accurately can perform these jobs for us, these complex job and time-consuming job. Then the team demand planners time is freed up so that they can focus on more strategic business endeavors. Demand planners no longer need to dedicate large amounts of time to creating short-term demand plans or triggering stock replenishments. So AI can do that for them, and the team can then concentrate on progressing higher value business objectives. So which products are the A category products, where the demands are coming along, which are the short-term demands, improvement in the process is required. So that will have a greater impact to the organization. Demand planners will need to interpret the role more strategically, dedicate more time to investigate how to improve operational efficiencies, and then identify new ways to increase profits and become more involved in the business as a whole, rather only sitting in the demand planning or supply chain. They will go beyond that and involved in a business. So forecasting definitely, because with artificial intelligence algorithm, forecasting automatically get increased because they are by aggregating the data sets from enterprise planning, CRMs, customer relationship management. These are the two different systems they can combine with this with the external variables like calendars of events, seasonality, weather. They will predict a real robust forecast for you. Uh, so in this manner, so we have basically better forecasts in our hand. This results in increased sales by improving order fill rates and shelf availability. So more responsiveness. So supply chain channels are undoubtedly vulnerable to a variety of external factors. For example, natural disasters, availability of raw materials that can impact demand forecasting rather than relying on the historical data. AI and machine learning tools use real-time calculation to respond to and find resolution for supply chain disruptions. They easily, those algorithms can suggest you what can be done in this particular situation. So, this automation also allow you to rapid responses to changing consumer demand and and ultimately you will improve your sales and profit and boost your consumer loyalties. These are the few points which my opinion. So in this change, demand planners don't think that their job will be taken over by the automation or digitization, but their role become very important. The next few questions: what kind of a skill set, what kind of the future basically initiatives they have to take or learn so that they can be remain competitive in this particular world. This is my humble thoughts.
Thank you, Bashir. Thank you. Imran, your input would be appreciated. But before you give an input, I would also like to, share one question right now, because what we are discussing right now, this question from one of the participants is very relevant to it, and also relevant to what you had earlier mentioned about the using of algorithms. So you do share your thoughts on the current and future trends, but also I'll display the question. Is from Shahryar Ali from MOL Pakistan. He's asking, and Imran, I would like you to respond to it, that isn't there an ethical and competition issue to such automated analysis? Amazon has admitted to farming their marketplace data to make competing products and is now under investigation. So once you respond to you, I would like you to also handle this question as we are talking about the technology and trends, please.
Sure. Okay. So on basically the current trends that we are getting is, I personally see that demand planning and overall supply chain is going to move away from the big giant ERP kind of systems where you build in the whole suite of multiple systems to get through demand planning. I think it is going to be small. You will see startups coming in who will handle specialty demand planning, who will handle specialty supply planning, etc. Would be talking to each other through either blockchain or overall data availability. The current trend is going at least that way. That there are more and more startups are coming which are working on these kind of things, which are cloud based, using the algorithms based on the data that you have available. So this is the current trend as of right now, that instead of demand planners spending time on actually matching the seasonality and understanding the seasonality, whether Ramadan is moving by 1 month, whether summer is moving by XYZ, there are systems now available which can basically put that all into account to create a right demand forecasting accuracy. Earlier, back in the day, when you used to demand plan, we used to see what is this specific SKU response to. Does it respond to seasonality? Does it respond to a trend? Does it respond to category growth, etc., etc.? Now all of that is can be done easily in terms of within a system at a click of a button. So that's the current trend right now, and future is as everybody has mentioned, that in future, I think as I was saying, that what is stopping us is the availability of the data. So once that data is available and is probably public knowledge, when we have more and more blockchain coming into the system, then all of this data can be combined together into machine learning modules or AI modules. Things like, for example, if you are in a consumer environment and you sell soap, for example, the commodity price is a big factor, which right now demand planner does not have the ability to build it into the system. That how the pricing model is there, and how commodity price, how weather, how previous history, etc. Changes this demand. So all of that can be built into system where system can basically make relations within the different sets of data and eventually help getting into that forecasting model. So these are the trends that are coming up, and probably in the next question we'll talk more about the skill set. But I think these are the things where the upcoming people in supply chain have to get familiarized with. They have to learn about that, get educated around it, etc. Now, on the question around the ethical competition. So if I can just read it out, isn't it? It depends, how you look at the data and what granularity and what data are you actually using. For example, if there is POS data, even today in our world, we use POSM data. We buy that data from different people, from different audit agencies. We buy the data from modern trade customers to use it into our demand planning process. And as long as you're not dealing with personalized data, which has personal information where there is no consent of information, then that probably is unethical. But as long as a customer, for example, if I have logged into Amazon and I have ticked on that box that fine, I am okay to share my information, then I don't think that there is anything ethical or unethical about this. So again, it really depends on what kind of data you're using, what kind of data you are sharing, and whether there is a consent from the specific individual that he's okay to share the data. Now you have, I think 2 years back there was a whole thing on Europe where everybody we signed the documents on, I think it was GDPR, that whether we are okay to share information, what information we are okay to share with. So more and more the trend will be going on this data security, more and more consent, what people would like to share, what people don't like to share, etc. So I think overall I don't see at least the POSM kind of data being unethical. But yes, if for example, if you are on Facebook, let's say, and you are searching something else on Instagram and suddenly you get a pop-up of an ad in terms of Facebook, fine, that is questionable, and that can be discussed in a different way. But in terms of PSM data, we do it today. We buy actually data of modern trade people. We buy data from different suppliers. We buy data from Nielsen. We buy data from other companies who actually sell this data and use it for our advantage. As long as you're not getting into some personal space, I think there's nothing unethical about it. That's my view.
Just to add, Numan, just to add on that, because there is a clear competition law. There are governing bodies to regulate all those things. But it doesn't mean that these things can be stopped, because the way the theft or basically bribing is not get stopped. These things keep on come across. And when the new challenges keep on come across, the more governing or regulatory body is going to come up and put in place the more stringent laws. The company has to comply. So I understand there are certain unethical issues out there with that, but it's all about, because you are right now into the digital world, because no one can thought about around 20 years back the way we are conducting a webinar, this thing. So we are, with our consent, we are sharing knowledge. So things keep on changing, and all the big companies buying the data and using those information to improve their forecasting, improving their basically access to the market. So that's if they are doing in line with the governing bodies and law, that's perfectly fine. If they are,
I think great point.
Yeah.
Sorry, great point raised by Bashir, that eventually what is going to happen is that with these kind of, I'm not really familiar with this example that Shahryar is sharing, but I think what will happen is that people are going to learn from these kind of issues, and the government and regulatory bodies are going to implement those changes to protect those kind of anti-money laundering, regulate these kind of data sharing practices. What I would say. So as Bashir was saying, that this is a common practice, just like other corruption stuff. These things have to be regulated. Data have to be regulated. What are the pros? What are the things that can be used in by one company to another? What information they need to share? Maybe it is going to come that Amazon is going to make it a public knowledge with the consent of their customer. So as we go into this, I think we are going to refine and regulate all of these policies, which will eventually make us visible onto the new digital world, which is ethical and which is at par with other competition.
Right.
Can I add one
Please.
point here? Actually, it depends how you look to the data. When you said that ethical thing, as Imran mentioned, there can be some regulations, etc., about this. But when you accept purchase, for example, or when you push the accept button, actually it is starting to record the data, and some of the data is already reachable for us. For example, when you log into Amazon or Alibaba kind of website, you can always get the data of which is the best purchase product, which is the best rated product, which is the most sold product, etc. When you consider this kind of information, it is all data. Right? I mean, if I'm building a new business, and if I check the Amazon's best rated products or best purchase products, I can reach this kind of data and I can use it as well, right? So this data actually depends how you are using it, of course, but we cannot ignore that data is everywhere in our life after these online platforms, etc. And it is for all. I mean, we can also use it for our sectors, for our knowledge, for our daily lives, etc. I don't see any ethical issues here, but also we need to ensure that we need to see that the way of working is changing. For example, I'm working from home in last 7 months, away from the factory, and not seeing my colleagues, my team, etc., let's say. And also supply chains are started to manage from the supply chain towers, maybe thousands of miles away. So we need to keep in mind that data is the power. It is not money, it is not the teams, etc. Data is the power. And we need this for having a sustainable business for ourselves. For example, as Bashar said, the data is very important, and artificial intelligence will be very important for the teams for manage the actions or take the action simultaneously with the recommendations of the artificial intelligence, right? So when we think about all these things, data is the most important thing in our new century, I think. And if you are using it to build your business and also to understand the customer trends, etc., I don't see an ethical issue here. But of course, the regulations should be in place, definitely. But I mean, we need to also be aware that in our daily life, etc., every button that we click is a data and going somewhere, and we are accepting this actually.
Okay.
Just want to add this point.
Thank you, Chidan. Thank you, Imran. Thank you, Bashir, for responding wholesomely to the question. Now, moving towards kind of the end of the webinar, but we will take on the questions after that as well. My question briefly, if Bashir, if you can touch on, we have already mentioned a lot of skill sets that are needed, or what kind of things a good demand planning requires. So if you can just briefly again summarize from your perspective the skill sets that are required for a good demand planner.
So I think so. I think it's a very, very common thing, and the majority of us know what good skill sets is required for demand planning. But I'll quickly go through that. They should be focusing on the continuous improvement, and they should not be complacent at any point in time. So they should be capable enough to leverage the customer and the sales intelligence, how to use that with the collaboration. And they also use the early warning indicators to mitigate the demand risk, side risk, because there are supply risks, there are demand risks. So everybody knows what demand risks are there, because the customers are not there, or new customers coming in and all this stuff. So they understand and keep records of key assumptions. So these are the very important things, because they should keep all those things. So they should know how to integrate the demand stream into the supply chain. So how they will use that, because which customer is going to be serviced from which warehouse, so that they can reflect the demand on those warehouses. They can continue to drive forecast accuracy improvement projects. So and then excellent working relationship within the organization, outside the organization, and you should have a superior business knowledge with them. And the topmost, Imran also touched upon that thing. So business and commercial acumen. So most important. If you keep on projecting your data, my forecast accuracy is 20%, 30%, my bias is going to around 40%. Nobody is going to care about in this organization, especially marketing, sales. They don't understand these things. They need to link with that. So how I missed to service my customer, how much turnover I missed from there, how much gross margin I missed from there. So whether we want to supply in future or not. So they need to deep understanding of business operation in which they are operating in, the commercial landscape, and external market factors also. They need to build credibility and connectivity across business. So combine this strong commercial awareness with financial expertise to influence stakeholders to maximize the shareholder values. So this is my take on this particular question.
Thank you, Bashir. Imran, if you can also add on to what Bashir said regarding the skill sets needed.
Bashir have nicely covered all the points that I have written. So, but no, just wanted to add. I always say, Numan, that I think demand planning is the most difficult job within supply chain. And the reason that I say is that because everything else in supply chain is very visible. It's physical, it's available. In supply planning, you have inventory. You can do a production plan, you see products running. In logistics, you can see products moving from one warehouse to other. You can see space utilization, etc., etc. Demand planning is such a place where things are basically in the air. You have to understand the behavior. You have to understand how to make good relationship with people. You have to have a very high EQ to basically have an interaction with the people, that are available in sales and marketing, to understand where they are coming from and how that number is impacting, so that you can build that behavioral bias into your demand plan system. So that on softer skills, I think that is extremely important. Other than that, what Bashir said, that overall supply chain and business acumen is extremely important. This person, the demand planner, if he is not able to make a relationship between what is the impact of doing this on supply chain, which is downstream and upstream in terms of business, in terms of profitability, in terms of, you have to talk. So at the center of supply chain is demand planner. At the upstream, you have to talk in terms of business to business people. When you're talking to your supply chain, you have to talk in their language in terms of capacity utilization and the labor management, etc. So this holistic experience, the more people have that experience, will only add up to their skill set. And lastly, I want to mention that, especially because we are at this point in history, I think where things are changing quite rapidly. So the skill set that we have, that we require today might be very different 5 years from now. So one thing that a demand planner should, anybody in supply chain should have, is that this continuous eagerness to learn and update themselves on what new is coming around education. We have seen back I think 10-15 years ago that we used to say that when somebody becomes a doctor's life is a constant education. I think now in this age we can say exactly the same thing for supply chain individuals as well. That whoever is there, he has to love that education. He has to love getting on board with new trends, etc. Because as I said, that these trends are going to change very, very quickly, more quickly than what we earlier anticipated. So these would be few things from my perspective.
Yes. Thank you. Before I move to Chitan, just one point I want to share from my experience on the skill sets, that when I started working as a planner with Unilever, the first thing I was taught or mentored into, that if you want to plan on the factory production plan and the supply, you need to understand the machines themselves as well. You cannot just sit behind your desktop, behind your laptop, and expect that you can send out the plan. Till you go and talk to the floor people who are actually working the machines, till you understand the capacity, the limitations of those machines, you cannot be a good planner. So that skill set is very necessary, and believe me, that has helped me develop good plans, more effective plans, and meeting the targets. The responsiveness, the reactiveness has been very sound in that. So that's my 2 cents to what Imran was saying, my add-on to that. So Chedan, if you may please also share your briefly from your perspective the skill sets that they are needed for a good demand planner.
Imran made a great point about speaking the language of business people and the sales people. I totally agree to him. I mean, for example, when we are talking about sales people, they are generally considering about the values, USDs, that they try to achieve. And when we talk about the manufacturing, they are talking about the labor hours, machine hours, the product utilizations, etc. They are talking about. And demand planner totally is in between these two groups. And when they are talking about manufacturing, when they are talking about the manufacturing people, they need to understand the machines, they need to understand the obstacles in the manufacturing, need to speak the same language of these manufacturing people. And when they are talking with the salespeople, they need to understand the revenue, profit, financial terms, and talk to the salespeople with this language. So they are the key people as a bridge. And also, there are very funny videos about this demand planning and forecasting. But whatever you do, actually, there is no perfect forecasting. We know that if you forecast higher, you are guilty. If you forecast lower, you are guilty. So at the end of the day, you need to love your job and you need to have fun side of your job. You shouldn't get demotivated easily and be agile about the outcomes, etc. Because here point is being open-minded and thinking new way of how you can improve your outputs and quality of your work. This is the key thing. And also being disciplined and keeping your data clean is also a critical point. I cannot imagine an undisciplined or unplanned person having the demand planning because it can easily get messed in a short time period. And as we said, collaboration with different teams. I mean, it can be even suppliers, sales teams, planning teams, manufacturing teams. Good collaboration with also good emotional intelligence, as Imran said. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you, Chidan. Now, coming to the last topic, and I ask this question in all my webinars at the end, that considering that we all are going through an unprecedented times, there's a lot of pressure on people, on jobs, on work. due to this pandemic and everything. So as professionals, as leaders within the supply chain domain, I would appreciate and I will request first, Imran, if you can, one advice that you would give to young supply chain professionals or to all supply chain professionals.
Actually, I have to. So number one, which I have already mentioned, that you have to have this thirst for knowledge within supply chain. You have to constantly evolve. So you don't let your learning stop at any point in time within supply chain. Keep on learning, because things are changing, and the more you are into those things, the better it is. Versus what we were 10 years ago. Right now, the platforms are available, like MITx, or otherwise you'll get either burned out, or you'll not be able to do it with that kind of rigor that is required. So again, when I started my career as engineering background, right? In 3 years within engineering, as soon as I moved into supply planning, I just knew that this is the place where I need to be. So you have to have that feeling as soon as you get into that kind of role, that yes, this is the thing that you want to do for the rest of your life. So this would be my two suggestions.
Thank you. Thank you. Chidan, if you can also please, one advice that you would like to give.
Yes, keep yourself learning the new things, as Imran said, and also read about and watch about your environment and the world, actually, what is going on in the world, what is the trends, etc. Keep yourself informed technically and also the social things, because it is really critical in your daily basis job. So
Okay.
that's all.
Thank you. So to conclude, Bashir, from your side, from your experience, one advice.
So one advice, because they covered, because I also fully agree with that information technologies and automation knowledge is very important. And that's, I can advise to every new generations to come and grasp that knowledge and go ahead for that. And then very important, because if you move into the leadership roles, you would like to grow. So you focus on communication, your collaboration, and how to manage the change and the care. The impact of change within our supply chain can affect employees on a very personal level. You will need to know how to empathize, and to listen actively to what people are telling you. With these skills, your leadership can quickly be, if you're not listening to them properly, if you're not showing a genuine care, your leadership can be quickly rejected. So my advice to you, so you should be genuine enough. For example, I can give you the very example, because during these times, there's a work pressures. Team members comes and there are people that get fired, because I'm doing around 6, 8 jobs, 10 jobs now. So if one of my team member came to me, asked him to come up and prioritize your job, I'll see what I can take out from you and what needs to be done. I listened very carefully and given some suggestions. And on contrary, other functions, senior managers call them and they're saying, okay, I'm not accepting to your proposal. This is the counter proposal. And end of the day, person worked very hard religiously to come up with the priorities of 10 to 12 activities. And then going back after the meeting without having any listening to them or caring with them and taking away as a reduced job, then you lose your respect. So you have to be empathetic in this time and try to use new ways of working, agile ways of working. So how to approach one thing in a different ways, in a new way. So that's the future. So you should, if historically one thing is happening in one way, don't basically box down to that particular way. Come up with the out-of-box thinking, come up with the caring, and these are the behavioral, caring behavior is very, very important to grow and prosper and become a supply chain leader.
Thank you, Bashir. Thank you, everyone. So basically, this effectively brings my questions to an end. But believe me, we have received a lot of questions from the participants. So I will try to pick the most relevant ones, because Ideally, this webinar was supposed to go on only for 2 hours, but we have already crossed the 2 hour mark. So I'll try to pick the right questions. So the first question is from one Mr. Mujib Rafiki. And basically he's asking, and Imran, I will like you to answer this. It's a very interesting question, and a lot of people always bring this point up as well. And the question basically is, for supply chain, is it necessary to have engineering degree or MBA?
Again, very interesting question, as you said, Numan. I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think that in future we are going for any degree. You have the recent trend, if you have been following, that biggest organization in the world have rejected any kind of degree. They don't need any kind of degree. When I started this job, nobody checked my degree. What you need to have is the skill set. What do you need to have is that kind of analytical background. So for example, if I take my personal example, that engineering degree that I have, what it has trained me is my analytical skills, how to make relationships, how to understand, if I do this, what would be the impact on the other thing. So that's what it has polished up. But there are other ways to polish it up. You need to have that kind of, in you. And the only person who can tell whether you have it in you is you. Nobody else is able to, tell you in that way. But yeah, I don't think that any degree is necessary, but you need that skill set, and that skill set can be developed. My suggestion, if you are into supply chain, you do few courses, you understand, for example, Apex CPIM is one of the best examples. If you start doing the first module, which is BSCM, you will know whether you are meant for supply chain or not. So this is what my answer would be in a nutshell.
Thank you. So I'll move on to the next question, and this I will put
to.
I
will add.
Yes, sir.
So most important thing is a common sense, which is not very common. So if whatever degree you have, if you don't have a common sense, you will not succeed in this profession. So my only bet on that.
Yeah.
Very important thing.
True. Agree with you, Bashir. Agree with you. So Chetan, I would request the second question to you. This is from Yusuf Quresha. He's a fresh graduate in SCM. He has a bachelor degree. And his question is that, how do you plan for demand of a new business in the new era? So basically talking about the new normal.
Yes, actually, it depends, because if the new business in a new area, I mean, new area is how new. This is one thing, because, for example, there are some areas new. For example, let's say that this, we have this hygiene things, which is, for example, new, but also very similar to the existing product ranges. So if there is an similarity in the existing product ranges, then sometimes we can use the existing product range data as a starting point and make assumptions about the future. But if it is a totally new business that we are not very experienced in, then we are working very closely with the sales team. So it is like the demand collection or demand sense meetings with the customers. If some of the customers are, showing attention to the new product or not, and if it is also, it is about the product. If it is a product that can be sold to a general marketplace, let's say, it is not like something like engineered to order or assembled to order kind of thing, then we are starting the launch with a bit higher level of stock, and then letting to have some history. But of course, if it is an engineer to order environment, which means that very specific to customer needs, very specific to customer desires to build the final product, then we are just going on with the customer orders or customer demands we know about. So really depends on the environment and the product itself. And also, I know that from the other sectors, it can be products about the shelf, products that have shelf lives, etc. So this is all about the products, and it is situation. It is how mature data we can have about the product, I can say.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you. So now,
If I may
thank you,
just add a
Chidan.
little.
Please.
So I think she covered it very well. If you have an existing product which can be related, somewhat similar, but if it is not, if it is completely new business, then all depends on the assumptions that you set together with your sales and marketing team, your category that you are getting into, all the information that you have available. How are you going to build that market or that segment? I'm sure, when something is coming up, there has to be some kind of data behind it, whether what is the category size that you are trying to achieve, etc. So that's what you start. And as Chidam was saying, then it is up to supply chain. How do they build that kind of shock absorption within the system? The other thing which I would pick up, which I wanted to add, was what Bashi mentioned earlier, is it's all about scenario plan. That it's not one number, it has to be a set of number in such cases where you say, okay, this is the best case scenario, this is this realistic scenario, this is the negative scenario, and then you build strategy accordingly.
Thank you. Thank you, Chidan and Imran. Now, the next question I will take again from Shahryar, and this is I would direct this to Bashir. And I'm very confident that this Shahryar Ali, he's from MOL, Pakistan. He's my nephew. So, Bashir, this question is for you. And how can we apply demand planning to oil and gas, where requirement cycles may be across years and the cost of stock out is several orders more than stock holding costs?
So very, very good, excellent question, because I'm a setting example. We are managing the demand planning in the not a real oil and gas, because the challenge is right now, because I signed a few things when I am appearing in this particular webinar to share certain level of information and share. I cannot go and beyond share certain level of information, which is the confidentiality. So it's there are clear rules of the game, the way we are used to plan. So it's very difficult, because this is the organizations, you can say that I have signed some basically confidentiality agreements, so I can share to certain limits, and I can't generalize things. I can share to things, but you can, again, you basically you check the assumptions, your demand patterns, and you basically forecast accordingly. There are so many streams. So most importantly, what kind of set of assumptions you have to forecast, and what are your targets for that, or you would like to achieve. So you are working under, this is what I said initially when I explained the demand planning. So what we are doing in a demand planning, we are basically seeing, we are limiting ourselves to certain product and services, and we are looking at the magnitude of sale in certain horizon. So it's basically comes in the later stages to evaluate the basically whether we have to cost benefit analysis is there, whether we would like to go ahead for that or not. So then supply planning, SNOP forums, different forums are going to come up and suggest you. So there are defined ways of doing and handling these things. But I suggest that you go and quickly work on your assumptions clearly. Your levers and drivers should be very clear what exactly you would like to achieve. So, and you can do the demand planning accordingly.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Bashir. Next question is for Chidan. And the question is that, let me just, about your journey in supply chain, what was the most critical area and also beneficial in terms of the learning curve, in your opinion? This is from Muhammad Azizuddin from Unilever Saudi. So what was the most critical area and also beneficial in terms of learning curve?
Actually, when I think about my career in supply chain, my starting point was the analyst. But when you are doing analysis about your KPIs, service levels, etc., you learn many things, because if you are digging into details of the root causes, actually, you already get many experience on the problems and also start to have ideas how you can solve it. This was one of the starting points, and I really learned a lot about the analyzing part, actually. And the second part is about I think customer service management was critical for me, because in that part I started to talk with the customer directly. So when you started to talk to directly with customer, what it adds you start to understand the customer, because customer is not something like numbers, like names, the addresses, the order lines, etc. But they have requests. They are showing you the disappointment directly. They are showing you the pleasure directly. So you start to sense the customer satisfaction, etc. And also you started to learn what is important for customer, what they really expect for, what kind of collaboration you can build with them, etc. You started to learn these kind of things, actually. So they started to become more than a name, or become more than a KPI for you. This is really a critical journey for me. And also the when I was in the head of supply chain, also managing all the financials of the supply chain was critical for me. A really good learning about the budgeting, financials of supply chain, etc. Because then in this case you started to learn that what you are doing and how it is ending with the financial value to the company. So you started to have the bigger picture about the supply chain. You started to see your effect on the supply on the financial figures, your deliverables, your effect on the company revenues, etc. These kind of things. So I think, in a summary, in each position that I have been, I learned many important things. And at the end of the day, they started to become a chain. I mean, when you consider my strengths personally, I think sitting in each chair added me many things. Either it is small, it is big, etc. At the end of the day, I am where I am, and it made a high value on me, actually. So for supply chain, I think this is really important, because you shouldn't think whatever you are doing as a, for example, if it is just demand planning, you shouldn't look this perspective. You should open your perspective, and then you should understand what you can add to the business and what you can learn more and do for your company more. And how can you make this link between each roles and responsibilities. So this is the summary.
Okay. Thank you. The next question, I would make a comment on the next question. That is from Safia Suman. She's asking, what are the key AI or technology you use in supply chain in your organization? Actually, a comment to all the participants, we have discussed in detail when it comes to the technologies. So I would be skipping those questions, but asking for specific examples from an organization. I would not like any of my participants to answer that, because that basically violates the confidentiality of this webinar as well, that nothing from any organization would be discussed on this webinar. And the second question also from Ms. Safia, I would comment on that as well myself. Has the pandemic affected the employment in supply chain sector in your organization? Same answer, nothing particular to any organization. But as a general comment, I will make, yes, it has impacted almost every other industry globally, not in this region, but in all other industries. Yes, there have been some winners, but there have been a lot of losers as well when it comes to when coming out of this pandemic as well. So yes, it has impacted industries in general. And I think the key to this is to have patience, to have more resilience as an individual as well, and so that you can walk out of it, with your head raised high. And hopefully the job sector would improve again. It has to revive again. It will revive again. So, but it would take a little time for things to get normalized and under the new normal as well. So, this is on there. Now, taking a question, I would be putting this to the next question. Is from Sayyid Shoaib Qadri, and this is for Imran. I would request Imran. I understand the frozen period, but based on the business requirements, things get changed and forecasts change accordingly. And forecast accuracy always being measured on M-2, M-3 forecast. So he would like to understand with this.
Again, people might have different perspective on this. My perspective is that the demand is ever changing. You should not have a frozen period for demand. This is my personal view, because if the moment you stop putting information flowing through the system, that's the moment where you actually lose the track of what is actually going on in the market. So in my view, demand has to be a constantly changing number. However, frozen periods are usually on the supply side, and that is driven from the capability, the ability to respond in terms of whatever is your manufacturing. Some people respond within a day, depending on the inventory. So many things can change, in that perspective. Now, why focus accuracy is measured based on M-2, M-3, M-4, M-1. Again, that depends on the organization to organization and what matters the most. For example, if you, let's say, have a packaging material supplier whose ability to respond is within a month, then and measuring him on M-4 would not make much sense in that way. But if you have a lead time of 6 months, M-2 won't make sense. You have to have M-6 kind of a forecast accuracy. So again, it's a balance, and it depends on what the organization is and what actually impacts your organization, and that's how you have to build the strategy.
Can I add a point
Please,
here?
sure.
Okay. About the, as I mentioned previously, actually about this, forecast accuracy is not making a lot of sense as a number itself, because what is the advantage of frozen period? As Imran said, it is just ensure that you are not playing with the demand which you are not able to supply. This is the situation, because if you are not able to supply a product in 2 months, then if you are making changes in the next month, then it doesn't mean that you will be able to find that item in the stocks. That is the reality. So in this case, frozen period is, you cannot change the forecast in the frozen period, but then it pushes you to make collaboration with the sales and marketing team to find new solutions. Yes, I'm not able to update the forecast, but if there is some urgency, then you need to think about some other solutions, right? I mean, this can be, supplying from different sources. This can be air shipment. This can be postponing the demand, etc. These kind of things. So it is not about the forecast accuracy, actually. It is about how you are able to supply your customer in the best way. So I hope I tried to make it clear about frozen period. It is not to satisfy your numbers, actually.
Very well said, both of them. So just to add, because the people are new to the supply chain, so I don't use this term frozen period. I use just too late. So if your demand within that period, you are just too, because
exactly.
the definition of lead time is the time required to perform an activity. Basic lead time. If you would like to pull one thing from one area and shift to another area, so you need a truck, road transport, labor to pull in, the amount of time and labor required to shift and perform that activity. So if you are placing demand with the materials going to require 3 months to arrive, and you are asking for demand the next month without forecast, you are too late right now. Nobody on the earth can service you. Yes, But there's a no frozen period. My concept is in marketing, there's a no frozen period. We're going to accommodate whatever you're going to mention, but don't think that. And I keep on telling them, because with the very basics, what is the objective of demand plan? So I keep on telling them it ensures the supply chain readiness, it ensures efficiency, quality of service, but not on the cost of increased waste.
Hmm.
It helps improves business results. It's not way to ensure stock availability. It will not ensure you the stock availability. So you have given a demand, there's supply disruptions, you cannot service. Does not consider any constraints. We don't consider any constraints. So we is it not to measure our ability to sell. We are not measuring our ability to sell. It's not a commitment, it's a plan. And there's a no frozen period. But lead times needs to be respected. So I keep on telling people time and again, that there's a no frozen period, but you need to respect the lead times. That's it, nothing else.
Correct, and I will add on to a little bit to that. There's always a cause and effect. So agree with you that you can. There's no frozen period, but any change or any disruption, there's a cause, there's an effect as well. So across the whole chain, and especially also sales and marketing, we need to understand that any change that they bring, the cause will have an impact as well. If not today, but it will have an impact. And as supply chain professionals, we try to minimize those impacts as well. That is our scope as well. But to say that to eliminate every time the impacts of those causes, that's a little difficult to do all the time. Coming now, we'll move on to the next question. I'll try to wrap this. Bashir, for you, I will put this. How demand planner play a role in positive forecast bias?
Okay, positive focus bias. So, so I
bias cannot be positive. It's always positive.
Positive or negative, because bias is
Bias.
positive or negative are not good, because they are basically different industries having a different targets for the bias. So some basically plus minus 5%, because forecast can be positive or negative, and some are basically plus minus 5, plus minus 3, plus minus 1. So they are different ranges depending upon the industry. So demand planner's role, because if what is the forecast, positive forecast bias? Again, the different formulas being used. So some you use if your actual sales, some call positive bias if your actual sales is higher than your forecast. So then you are a positive bias, because you're uh, underpitching your forecast and you're overselling that thing. But some industries calculate other way. If you are forecasting higher and selling lower, and they are saying that you are selling lower, your forecast price is positive. Both the formulas are being worked in different industries. I've been experienced. Initially, as a junior, I got confused, but now I'm basically start to living with that. So both formulas, no have a difficulty. The demand planners, if are missing uh, any assumptions into that. So in both the cases, if your assumptions are not right, you are not capturing the input in the right time. So only I'm talking about the person level. What person? You are not missed to enter the promotion. You missed to enter the any other um, feedback or information or activity received from sales or marketing. Make it part of the demand plan. Then you are basically creating a positive bias into your forecast. So this is the individual one, because there are so many other factors like system errors, like you went wrong with the assumptions, you went wrong with the basically there's some unwanted situation happened, like in COVID, because there's an earthquake. So force majeures have happened, Lebanon situation, so economic downturn. So there's so many factors. But so the question should be how demand planner should play a role to improve this time. So demand planner's role is to eliminate those biases, not to create those biases. Work on closely with the team, take out the, because I can, these are not the the reactive measures, because these KPIs, we get to know when the performance happened. So you pick up the data, you can do evaluate that, which are the big ticket items which are creating and taking my forecast down. So you need to analyze whether there's a loss tree concept in the forecasting. The loss tree demand side losses, there are supply side losses, there are system side losses, there are in team demand planner side losses. So there are so many loss trees are available on the net. You can go and check, and then demand planners has to evaluate which basically areas impacting or creating these biases. That needs to be supported with, you take that insight from your analysis and present into the relevant forums, whether it's a supply chain issue, supply planning issues, you have to discuss the supply plan. It's a demand side or customer service issue, you have to go and discuss with them and make sure that in future these things should not happen. That's my
Thank you. Now we will try to come to a close. I will only now put forward two questions. First one would be for Chidan, and then to Imran, the last question. So, Chidan, this question is from our mutual friend Umang. She's saying, don't you think for the next decade or so, we'll be excluding 2020 for a true demand analysis? This was an era of hoarding. Also, consumer trend have shifted dramatically due to everyone staying at home. So, your analysis on this, your comments, please, Chidan.
Yes. Actually, yeah, I mean, I would like to exclude 2020 from my life as well. So it was, but we really need to understand the effect on the demand cycle. There will be some industries maybe which will be affected, very less, so that history may not be totally excluded. Let's say there will be some industries that the demand is really affected a lot and huge gap there is according to the history. So yes, 2020 demand can be seen as outliers. And also it can depend on the horizon as well. Maybe, for example, the demand of the half year two, second half year can be much more realistic, and half year one can be unrealistic. So we can define these outliers as well. So there is no totally right or wrong in this reply. But yes, in every situation, if we see an outlier in the demand history, we need to clean and exclude. I hope it will not be the whole year, but yes, we need to exclude the outliers for a better forecasting for next year. And also, as we said, we need to be reminded that new technologies, etc., are coming on way. As we mentioned, the way of workings are changing. We are managing our offices from our home, etc. So the new technologies are coming. So maybe there will be new technologies that will deal with these kind of exceptions much better than the humans as well. So
Yeah.
that's it from my side.
Thank you. To be honest, everyone would like to, remove 2020, but I was just thinking that from my perspective, I probably would not, because if 2020 was not there, supply chain talks would not have come.
Yes,
This
exactly.
was this is a product of the lockdown. This is a product of staying at home and positively utilizing my own time, and I
E-
wanted to share experiences with the world. So I would still like to keep some part of 2020 with me.
Actually, you are right. You are right, because all the crises also bring some opportunities in itself. For example, about the question of Safiya, she asked that if we are reducing the number of people, etc., these kind of things. I mean, people shouldn't concern as long as they improve themselves, because also the new opportunities are coming. For example, companies from Germany, companies from USA, companies from other countries are searching for people who can remotely do the job, right?
Yep.
So this is also a new opportunity that we never think about before this COVID situation. So positive mindset is the key. Being agile is the key here, and look future in a bright way, I think.
Yes.
Is the key.
Thank you. So, thank you, Chidan. Now I'll move to the last question of the day, evening, everything. This is for Imran. This is again from Shariad. He's asking, how can one differentiate between a resilient supply chain overall and a supply chain resilient to a single event model? Or is the cost of such redundancies acceptable in the long term?
Again, as most of the questions, Numan, it is not, and Cheriar, it is not, there's no right or wrong answer. It depends what, as we said at the starting, that, overall supply chain is, or demand planning is not a supply chain process. It is a business planning process. So the end goal or end game goal should be that what makes the most money for the business organization. So it is quite possible that, you want to bring, you cannot, for COVID, you cannot build your organization around COVID assumptions, right? But what it is possible is that you work, you find out, you analyze that what has happened in this kind of situation and take learnings from it. For example, if your suppliers were all around the world and it was working brilliantly and beautifully, and you never thought of bringing those things closer to your home, now that gives you an opportunity, and that's how you bring resilience. Resilience does not only mean that you need to build buffers and buffers in your stock levels. It is how you mitigate those kind of risks, not around only single event, but around overall things. As I just mentioned that, earlier, for example, you had only one supplier that you were relying on to, you were in the partnership with them, they were placed on the other side of the world, and it was working very effectively. But now, as an opportunity, you have found out, you have learned from this risk that has just happened. The important thing is that how do you build that kind of resilience? How do you place your suppliers? Do you change formulations, for example, to be less reliant on multiple people, become reliant on less number of people, etc. So that's how I would define it. The COVID is not the right example, in my opinion. You can never plan for such event in your life. However, yes, there are few risks that you can obviously mitigate, because we were just discussing something that, this COVID actually happened or initiated from China, and it impacted, the world. What if you are in a food industry where, certain thing happen in a certain animal where the product comes from? You can never build for such events, what I'm trying to say. So what important thing is that how do you learn from the example, and how do you make your supply chain more resilient, and not just by building stocks and heaps levels of stocks in the organization, by other methodologies.
Okay.
So I simply add on that, because I think very well explained by Imran. Supply chain is part of a business, and the definition of business is why we do a business. We're doing business to generate some money, generate some profits. So we are not sitting, supply chain is not sitting on the unlimited resources. So supply chain has to utilize resources which are being allocated by the organization to support the operations to run profitably. So it's no right or wrong answer, because supply chain can be as resilient based on their resources. So you can compare, or you can judge, or you can rate supply chain resilience based on the resources available and in the context of how they are basically placed in terms of the cost to serve. That's it.
Okay. I think I would thank you all the three of you, Chetan, Imran, and Bashir, for taking out the time and joining me in this webinar. And I believe with the amount of questions we had, and also to the extent that how much the time, I had originally planned it for 2 hours, but now it's almost running into 3 hours. So I thank you all for joining me, and it was a pleasure and an excellent learning experience for myself, and definitely for the participants as well, regarding demand planning, for your based on your insights. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Norman, and thank you all. It was a great pleasure to meet you as well.
Same here. Same here.
voice.
Okay, thank you. I'll end the broadcast now. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.